Dear colleagues, I think we can start. The topic for today is trade association with the EU as a tool to overcome the consequences of COVID-19. And before we start, I would kindly ask you to choose your language preference. Dear participants, you have a panel at the bottom of the screen with interpretation, from which button you will be able to choose between English and Ukrainian. The Ukrainian goes under the label Russian, so don't fret, just use Russian for Ukrainian, or English if you prefer English. That's where you will be able to hear interpretation, because our speakers will speak in English. So please finalize your settings before we start. Also, when we have a discussion, you can use whatever language you prefer, that is Ukrainian or English, and it will be interpreted. I hope everyone has made his or her choice of language. Also, just for technical reasons, don't forget to switch off your mic when not speaking, because it will pick the environment sounds from your place and it will be a mess. Otherwise, when we have a discussion, please speak up, please have your video on, because we'd like to have it as personal as it is possible. Hi, everyone again. I'd like to invite Mr. Johannes Bauer, head of the Department for Economic Cooperation, Environment and Energy from the EU delegation to Ukraine. Please, Mr. Bauer, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for inviting me to this event, and indeed it's a timely event and an important discussion what the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, or what the EU-Ukraine Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement can do and can help in these difficult times. Obviously, the economies of the European Union, but also of Ukraine, have been very hard by the COVID pandemic. We do not know exactly what will be the total impact, as the pandemic is not yet over. But it is, of course, expected that the GDP is to decrease in 2020 for Ukraine between 7.7 and minimum 3.5% in Ukraine, after years of continued growth, and after just about the start of a real economic recovery of Ukraine after Maidan. International financial support from the IMF and the EU may certainly help Ukraine to cope with the and the deteriorating budget situation.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just a second. I'm sorry. You can continue. I just wanted to stop this intervention. Sorry so much.
Yes. Okay. And for this important international financial support, I would like to cite in particular that the EU and Ukraine have signed last week an MOU concerning the most recent macro-financial assistance provided by the European Union to Ukraine. This is 1.2 billion euro in form of long-term loans on very favorable terms. These funds will contribute to enhancing the macroeconomic stability of Ukraine and mitigating, hopefully, the severe negative socio-economic consequences of the pandemic. And this program is worth, as I said, 1.2 billion euro and will be dispersed in 2 equal installments. And the first one after ratification and confirmation by the Ukrainian side. And the second one later this year. And the second one indeed is linked to a number of conditionalities for further reforms in Ukraine's economy and reform efforts. It is certainly also true that the further strengthening of the implementation of the DCFTA, of our free trade agreement and the association agreement, will also help the economy. The EU shares in Ukraine export has increased from around 17% in 2012 to now 34% in 2015 and 40% in the beginning of 2020. This is a huge increase, and this is obviously also in large part thanks to the DCFTA. The EU remains and is now by far Ukraine's biggest trading partner, and I think this is a positive development which Ukraine's economy was able to perform after the signature and entry into force of the association agreement. The pandemic inevitably in Ukraine has slowed down or refocused some reforms efforts by deviating resources and political attention. I should add that some personal changes in the government and in the management of state authority have also contributed to that, probably. However, there has been in the meantime also some important reform steps undertaken in the area of agrarian and rural development policy with the adoption of the land law and the opening of the land market in Ukraine, and also concerning intellectual property rights. So the reforms continue, and we would, of course, very much hope that the reform steps in Ukraine under the DCFTA and under the association agreement continue. Regarding trade irritants, well, there's still one important one, the wood export ban, which is still in place and which can hopefully be solved through arbitration this year. And we hope also that all those former trade barriers which have been removed since 2014 by Ukraine will not be replaced by new ones. In this respect, we are particularly concerned with the draft local content requirements in the pipeline in the Rada, and also that some safeguard investigations have been launched recently. The EU has shown, in addition to the macro-financial assistance, solidarity with Ukraine, and has quickly mobilized a support package of 190 million euro to help Ukraine tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. And this includes also a large part of support, in particular to Ukrainian SMEs, and to support the real economy. These programs are currently being finalized and will hopefully be very soon be available for Ukrainian companies. In addition, the Commission will make available 500 million euro of guarantees under the European Fund for Sustainable Development in the EU's neighborhood, including Ukraine. And this will facilitate the provision of liquidity in banks through working capital, trade finance, or through moratoria on debt service. We support a lot of activities, in particular for SMEs in Ukraine. We fund the SME Development Office MEDO. The EU, together with other donors, has set up the Better Regulation Delivery Office, BRDO. And we are also supporting, for example, the Business Ombudsman Council. We also support 50% of Ukraine's fees in important EU programs such as COSME and Horizon 2020. And we are just about to prepare a new separate 20 million euro SME support program, which will combine support to policy making and better regulation and strengthening business support ecosystems and clusters to better serve SMEs in Ukraine. I would like to underline that for the EU, of course, the focus on a green recovery, which is socially just, resilient, sustainable, and climate neutral, is particularly important. This is a key for all support measures, which has been now adopted just in the EU for EU member states. And this will be also crucial for our support to Ukraine and other Eastern neighborhood countries. So in this context, I would like to welcome also that last week the Rada has adopted a law endorsing the agreement between some renewables investors and the government. But we would like also to express our concerns about the continued critical financial situation in the electricity sector, for example. And without addressing the structural deficiencies in the energy market and in the electricity sector, this difficult financial situation in Ukraine will not be solved. So I hope that after the summer break, in the next month, work in the Rada will also continue on further reform steps, implementing the association agreement and the DCFTA. We are very much interested that these reforms continue in Ukraine, and that these reforms are done also under the green recovery label. And then I think that Ukraine's economy, together with the recovery in the European Union itself, will be able to recover from the current crisis, hopefully very soon. Thank you very much for your attention.
Щиро дякуємо вам, пане Бауер.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bauer. I do know of several representatives representing EU delegation in Ukraine being present here with us, and it is really of paramount importance to relay the steps you mentioned to representatives of SMEs and to other engaged in implementation of the agreement you mentioned. I'd like now to give the floor to Ms. Christina Henschel. She represents the GIZ, the Regional Fund for.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to everybody once more. And I would like to point out, when the current pandemic arose, we were aiming at quickly re-steering all our efforts that we're currently running. And this was also requested actually by the commissioning ministry for GIZ, which is BMZ. It's the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development Cooperation. And we were very glad. As a regional fund, we are usually supporting, as you already stated, public administration reform in all the countries of the Eastern Partnership. We were very glad that we were able to re-steer our activities to actually run a very specific activity that has been implemented in all the 3 countries of the DCFTA. And it included 2 big steps. So one was actually a collective analysis, how businesses are actually individually hit by the current pandemics and by the current crisis. And the second big step was a search for references, what is actually needed in this very specific context now, in order to support and also in order to mitigate with the application of the DCFTA. Yeah. And so we were very happy in this frame to cooperate with the European Business Administration, who conducted hundreds of surveys for us in all the 3 DCFTA countries, and who then fed all the results that we received into policy papers and organized dialogue formats like the one that we are having today in Ukraine, and which we are now presenting to the members of the business community. So we are very happy with this achievement, actually. And in particular, we are very glad to see the high-level interest that arose. And it's a public-private dialogue, but also we are very glad to see that from the public side, we caught the interest. So thank you for that. And we're very much hoping we all can make good use of that. So these are my best wishes for a constructive exchange. And as it has been already mentioned also from the side of the EU delegation, making full use of the DCO, it will be like really crucial in the light of the pandemics to also keep an eye on an intensified multilateralism of the EU trade policy. Yeah. And if I may make this reference, as it was stated last week on the same topic by a high-ranking EU official, don't put all your eggs in one basket, even if this basket stands at home. Yeah. So I would like to thank you all very much, and I wish us a fruitful exchange. Thank you.
Дякуємо вам, пані Кристино. Колеги,
Thank you, Christina, and dear colleagues. We can go to the part that concerns recommendations to private sector. It is not your typical presentation because it is not just about some forewords and welcoming speeches. It is about the situation when recommendations, advice, and hopes have been voiced from business representatives. So we'd like to hear what Ukrainian businesses think. This has been a part, this presentation has been a part of a survey carried out with support of EBA on the topic of DCFTA as a tool to overcome economic consequences of COVID-19. And it has been done jointly by Denis Basilevich, key expert of the project, and I'm Anastasia Baklan, the project coordinator. It is a project which is called Public-Private Dialogue Project. It is implemented also in Georgia with support from GIZ. We had a survey carried out among 40 respondents from the private sectors. We had 25 representatives from Ukrainian companies, both small and medium enterprises, and 15 business associations, NGOs working with businesses, consultancies. It was carried out throughout June and July this year, so the results are quite fresh in this regard. When we started the project, one of the key questions for us was about the number of surveys already carried out also on matters related to COVID pandemics in Ukraine and elsewhere. We had lots of such surveys carried by USAID, EBA, the American Chamber of Commerce, UNIDO, Industry for Ukraine, the Center for Economic Strategies, and Denis will speak more about this. But again, I think why we are different, because we were able to include in our results the responses and feedbacks from our businesses. So in terms of the situation, 13 of the percent of respondents said they were forced to temporarily stop their exports or imports from EU for the period of pandemics. It was interesting because we feared the number would be much higher. So it can be said that it's a pleasant result that just 13% have said it. So, say one company working with refrigeration equipment, they said that the pandemics has had no effect on the export-import operations, but the payment time has increased. Still, 72% of the respondents said that the pandemics did contribute to further digitalizing their companies or enterprises or organizations in terms of online conferencing, online meeting, uh, oversight of performance, again done via the internet. And well, actually, this method of moderating and managing your production processes for many has become more efficient than the standard one. Now, some less positive information. 65% of respondents said they have no idea of the standards of DCFTA or have problems with identifying what DCFTA actually is. It is possibly due to the fact that bigger companies, particularly EBA members, have more knowledge of that. They are more covered by, say, EBA activities. They work on a higher level. They know more about the privileges and benefits they get from DCFTAs. But again, small and medium businesses, even if working within the framework of this agreement for nearly a decade, have very little knowledge of the standards applicable in this regard. We asked people what prevents them from using all the benefits of DCFTA also during the COVID pandemics.
Виявилася низька обізнаність щодо суті.
And not surprisingly, the highest ranking problem has been low level of awareness of what DCFTA is. The second mention was earned by national level legal regulations and problems. The third one was barriers to access to markets. We were glad to find that language barriers were probably the least concern for them because it was ranked at the lowest place. In terms of feedbacks, Outward Company, one of the respondents, said it would be beneficial to have more information awareness measures to improve the overall knowledge. An IBI rating agency mentioned certain discrepancies in technical regulations. We mean those operating in Ukraine and those in the EU, which translates into certain problems for machine building industry. And given that some machine builders in EU have government support schemes, they surely are more competitive compared with the Ukrainian machine builders who do not enjoy the same level of support. We also had a web conference within the framework of Industry for Ukraine platform, and the participants mentioned that sometimes double taxation is a handicap for Ukrainian companies, reducing their competitiveness on international markets. For some Ukrainian goods, double certification is additional problem because it affects the cost of products. Based on the results of the survey, we designed some basic recommendations from the project. We had no time to show the full pictures, but we did identify some key issues. For example, technical barriers in terms of harmonization of quality infrastructure with European requirements and infrastructure to support experts. I would like now to pass the floor to Denis Basilevich to continue from that moment on.
Так, будь ласка, якщо можна, трохи звук дуже тихо. Чуємо тебе, але дуже тихо.
Чуєте мене?
Uh,
Нормально? Звук є? Добре. Доброго дня, шановні колеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues.
Денисе, чи є в тебе гарнітура, можливо, скористатися?
Анастасія, чудово чуто.
Тому що дуже погана якість звуку.
Дуже добре чуто.
Ну, зараз. Хвилинку.
Добре, все. Продовжуємо.
Є? Добре. Доброго дня, шановні друзі, шановні колеги.
Good afternoon again, dear friends and colleagues. Really, this conference is of great interest. I'd like to thank the project management team and Anastasia for being able to speak here. We also have a plan to launch a pilot project together with Ministry of Economy with support from UNIDO to look into barriers and their potential effects on businesses. We want to see how government bodies can be involved in solving the problem with these barriers. I think that these results will be very interesting for our project with intended results that we're going to have. So as Anastasia already mentioned, we try to prioritize those lines of activities that we should follow in order to see what prevents DCFTA from being fully implemented in Ukraine. And we did identify that technical barriers are really a serious problem for many companies here and for numerous European peers. So technical barriers was definitely one of the priorities. There is also a vision of the problem as of a long-standing one, because really big companies have been already able to work with European companies, European centers for compliance assessment. They are more or less good with it, but the question remains of relevance for small and medium businesses, because they have to do through these certification procedures, acceptance procedures for on European markets, and this is much more costly for them, sometimes prohibitively costly, and this is an important problem for us to look into. Similar barriers can be found for European businesses trying to work in Ukraine. About a year ago, when we were preparing our proposals, business proposals to lobby legislative initiatives in the parliament, some of these initiatives have been already adopted by the parliament. So one of the questions was, again, cost-based certification requirements, cost aspects of it. For example, if we take about medical equipment, we have 10% difference in the cost of certification in US versus Ukraine. Measuring equipment, 5-time difference. Mining equipment, 3-fold difference. How these matters could be resolved if we look into the law on technical regulation adopted last summer. It is possible for Ukrainian and European assessment centers to enter into direct agreements, but definitely these agreements would not be able to cover all of the regulations. And furthermore, Small and medium businesses have little knowledge of it. Next, it is about ACAs, as it is popularly said, the industrial visa-free regime. Why ACAs are important? Because with ACA agreement, we can synchronize our regulatory and technical regulations. For example, for low voltage equipment, for electromagnetic compatibility, for machines and devices. It can be furthered onto personal protective equipment, toys, and other categories. Again, there is a question how businesses should cooperate with the government to prioritize their requests and desires to work constructively in this way. Machine builders and other big industrialists are also interested in ACAs in these three areas. It is of paramount importance and definitely a priority. Our industrialists cannot use DCFTA to its fullest because of certain limitations that they have. This limits them from participating in European tenders. This limits their ability to join in European value-added chain creation. And if we have Mr. Kryzhanivsky and Melnichenko with us today, maybe they will comment on that. Again, we say that there is a need for strong interaction between businesses and the government. And here is the list of recommendations for both the Ukrainian and the European partners, from optimization of infrastructure of assessment, bodies of compliance assessment, because the centers for assessment of compliance in Ukraine, they're sparse and scarce, and they are not always equipped to the level of standard to really assure needed quality. We need to consolidate our resources, material resources, organizational resources to launch a really fully fledged mode of assessment for three basic technical regulations I mentioned. Then it would be necessary to have an expert mission sent here by the EU to do preliminary evaluation of the Ukrainian quality infrastructure to see whether Ukraine is really ready to launch negotiations on ACAs. It is necessary to obtain the European Commission's mandate to initiate negotiations on ACA between Ukraine and EU. We need to improve communication with businesses to better explain key principles, key provisions of ACA agreement, also in the scope of the existing communicative platform for technical regulation. We need to improve collaboration with some of European leading business associations like Euro Chambers, Business Europe, Orgali, Industry for Europe, etc., to better notify people about benefits of ACAs and how to join them. We are keenly interested in signing this agreement as soon as possible. And finally, we need to enhance the efficiency of using the Ukrainian side of the platform of civic society Ukraine EU in terms of better consolidation of business positions, better negotiations with European partners. Definitely to better use the analytic we have, we need to consolidate these efforts to analyze the information and to make decisions based on that. The next point is export support infrastructure. As Mr. Bauer has mentioned, owing to DCFTA, the EU has become the key trading partner for Ukraine, reaching for some 40% of Ukrainian external trade operations. Definitely, the current picture with the COVID pandemic shows certain slump in these indicators. We have, you see, more than 13% reduction of exports to EU for the 5 months of this year. It is matched by nearly 13% reduction of imports from EU countries. On the other hand, the tendency towards digitalization, we see that 72% of Ukrainian companies mentioned the intensive efforts in this area, shows that we are able and we are capable. It does not take one to be an IT guy or IT guru to go for it, and people can do it. It shows we have great potential to develop further this digital transformation of economy. We have resources, we have engineers, we have desire to do it, and we are quite able to become a fully fledged participants of this digitalized economy system of the EU. And as Anastasia mentioned, 72%, again, they said that digitalization is going on. That is, companies increasingly transfer to digital economic models, going to Industry 4.0 format. Our platform, Industry for Ukraine, support to businesses already involved in Industry 4.0. These are companies with increased added value who participate in value-added chain formation. From here, we naturally go to financial mechanisms for restoration of EU after the pandemics. We've already heard about unprecedented measures and the package of support adopted by the EU to restore the economy. If the European Parliament approves it, and we hope it will do it, we are facing more than $500 billion in form of pandemic crisis support measures. And we think that this money will mean also better chances of Ukrainian businesses to participate in the restoration of economy in the EU, and also here it will offer us new possibilities. We also know that the European Commission is currently looking to identify 14 industrial ecosystem. Again, a huge field of possibilities for us. Our enterprises should identify the resources available to participate in these European networks and chains. So we will need to see how Europe will continue with support of the industrial sectors. But again, industrial does not mean, brick and mortar things. It includes tourism, it includes pharmaceutical companies, everything that is able of creating added value. We also have in Ukraine some similar measures to boost the development. We had the program T9, and we had COVID fund in amount of more than 60 billion hryvnia. So we had certain measures introduced to reduce the fiscal burden on SMEs during the pandemics. So these are smaller scale, but still important measures and steps that the Ukrainian side had made to a bit facilitate the situation. Definitely it is not enough. And we still need to think about how to better develop the export-oriented structures. Again, our recommendations to governmental authorities include better awareness raising of the benefits of DCFTA. This should be done in expert communities, among businesses. We also would recommend ensuring better funding of the so-called Office to Promote Experts of Ukraine, to make it more competitive and more capable. This would provide, for example, possibilities of creating trade representations, trade offices abroad. We have economic advisors, as they are called today, but they're not as capable as trade representations abroad. Next, we should think about better supporting Ukrainian exporters, presenting their goods and services abroad during trade fairs. We could help them with group stands there and better promotion possibilities. Also, we would advise better support of sectoral programs for Ukrainian manufacturers willing to enter new markets. We need to look into new, wider set of tools for support of economic diplomacy to support the interests of exporters working in EU member states. We need to promote Ukrainian brands, goods. We need to increase the level of representation by involving for example, the Council of Exporters and Investors with the Ministry for External Affairs of Ukraine, diplomatic institutions, up to the visits of the President of Ukraine, to create more solid ground and better promotion possibilities for Ukrainian companies willing to operate abroad. I think it is necessary to promote the services of the Export and Credit Agency. It was a dream for many years. Now we have this agency, but little is known among businesses as to the range of services they offer. Meanwhile, this agency is able to protect Ukrainian exporters from risks of not receiving payments, of sustaining financial losses related to performance of foreign trade contracts. They offer insurance, reinsurance, and guarantee contracts. So this should be used. We need to look into better prospects of development of cluster potential in Ukraine. And we need to synchronize them with relevant clusters operating under the aegis of the European Platform of Cluster Cooperation. At the moment, the efforts in Ukraine are still not on a par with what is required. We have to promote Ukrainian businesses willing to participate in European industrial ecosystems through communication channels, for example. We need to promote instruments of the high-level dialogue between Ukraine and the EU among businesses. We need to go more horizontal. We need to have industrial sector. We have these high-level dialogue events carried out every year, but unfortunately, businesses are seldom invited there. Meanwhile, businesses should have their say, and we should see more sectors represented during these high-level dialogue sessions. It will contribute not just to better participation in European industrial ecosystems, but it will also open up new avenues of cooperation. We need to promote the dialogue with businesses to better integrate Ukraine into EU digital markets, because we definitely need to see our economy becoming more green and more digital. And finally, we want to promote the participation of Ukrainian businesses in annual European Commission's project of European Industrial Week. We've been lucky to participate in this project for 2 years. We hope that next year Ukraine will be present as well, and it will be completely different in terms of the image it will beam. So thank you for listening. I'm glad to take questions from you. I do hope that we will be able to really put the DCFTA at entirely another level of implementation, and we hope that we will improve the possibilities of dialogue.
Колеги,
Thank you,
завершаємо
Denis.
демонстрацію слайдів.
And
Повертаємося
this
до
is the
нашої
end of our
дискусії.
slide
Хочу запросити до
presentation, and
слова
we can come back to our
партнерів.
discussion. I'd
Бізнес-асоціацію в
like
Україні,
to
яку сьогодні представляє пані Світлана
ask our
Михайловська, заступник
partners,
виконавчого
EBA.
Світлана, будь ласка,
Svetlana
посилюйте
Mikhailovska is
позиції
representing
власників.
the EBA. Please say a couple of words. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. The topic is really of great importance. It is discussed at various levels. On behalf of the EBA, I think the majority of topics voiced by Denis, developed throughout the project, are really of high relevance. And generally, I would like to tell you that the pandemics and the COVID situation, in view of the majority of businesses, it did not, it has not become the bottom. It has rather become a litmus test for many to see what are the bottlenecks that businesses face. Based on the evaluation carried out among the top managers of EBR member companies, the investment attractiveness of Ukraine was 2.51 out of 5 possible of the score of 5. The most negative trends did not include COVID at all. We would mention some reforms stopped. We would mention really insignificant progress with anti-corruption and reform and the reform of the judiciary, but not COVID. So your survey exactly shows some more deep points that are not so related to COVID, but they are really deep in terms of their effect, whether it is about trade barriers, fiscal barriers, customs barriers, in spite of digitalization efforts we see. There have been some positive events in terms of customs reforms, but this is not all, and the reform is far from over. We still increasingly see how law enforcement tries to interfere in customs operations, and even the so-called electronic cabinets of customs agents that has been online for quite some time to the and is very much appreciated, is still not able to resolve all the problems that are there. Again, it hinders some efforts to retain the flow of goods in and out of the country. We have an ongoing issues with Ukrainian seaports, with Ukrainian railroad company, Ukrzaliznytsia. It has become increasingly relevant to speak about the role of Ukrzaliznytsia in overall efforts to preserve the trade flow. There are some problems that Ukrzaliznytsia has to sort out itself to contribute to this trade exchange. There is a question of permission for auto carriers because it is directly related to possibilities of exporting products. We see limitations on cargo traffic exchange between Ukraine and the EU zone. Another question that is always mentioned includes dismantling technical barriers to trade, but it has been a long-standing issue as ACA-related matters. We are in constant dialogue with the delegation of the European Union to Ukraine and other stakeholders because we have four priority industries singled out around which the negotiations revolve. Ukraine is making steps to implement, to ratify this agreement, but we do understand that even more needs to be done. And we need to revise the steps taken by our technical regulation authorities to enable bilateral test agreements, recognition. This won't be a panacea, though, and definitely more active dialogue is needed between the two parties, and we call upon all the parties of this negotiation process in Ukraine, in the EU, to speak more openly and to resolve problems more decisively. This is exactly what I would like to mention in terms of improving experts, prospects, and by the way, I am really supportive of the idea of having trade representations abroad. I can only thank Ms. Stefanishina for her efforts in this regard. We can only commend the Ministry of Economy for their efforts in this area. It is really important that any negotiation between the government and investment partners go with more involvement from business community members, because Ukraine needs to be able to protect its business and develop it in parallel. During our previous sessions, we mentioned also matters related to protectionism and measures taken currently by different stakeholders. Now we speak predominantly about Ukraine. And again, Ukraine needs to take very balanced steps to fight protectionism, because there's recent measures on localization. This might mean certain problems for competition as well. The EBA, the European Business Association, which represents not just the international business community, but Ukrainian industrialists and businessmen as well, this matter is rather sensitive and should be carefully thought. Thank you, Svetlana. And now the word from private sector, Sergei Zablovsky, head of the Secretariat of the Council of Entrepreneurs with the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Don't forget to switch your interpretation function into Ukrainian. So if you want to be translated, just don't forget to choose your language. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for having me during this conversation. During the previous actually session, I said that the research like the one we're discussing now is of great importance to better understand the scope of problems that Ukrainian businesses face, and also to better understand the set of tools that DCFTA offers for them to be more successful. I think the more we have such reviews and assessments, the better recommendations we will have. Just follow the Dennis mention of particularly trade and technical barriers to exports and imports. I already had my suggestions and proposals. Denis mentioned the trade representation mechanism, and there was a suggestion to have like an honorary trade attaché position instituted. Though honorary indeed, it would really contribute to better represent Ukrainian businesses abroad, even in this volunteer format. It would improve economic prospects in dealing with the EU countries, with other countries of the world. Digitalization, yes, this is a priority, and COVID really helped us to become more digital. Many countries already mentioned it. Many countries speak about the so-called position of digital ambassadors to represent all sorts of business presence, product solutions elsewhere. My suggestion is to have similar position with Ukrainian institutions also abroad, like digital representative of Ukrainian businesses. There is a nice idea of setting up a common digital market with the EU, and it would provide for better chances of Ukraine's integration into digital services and digital markets. It will contribute to Ukraine joining this added value chain. It is necessary to inform businesses about that. The awareness is not very high. People also need to know more about challenges they may face, but also they have to know about benefits and positive effect they will receive from such participation within the framework of Eastern Partnership, because there is an initiative on single common digital market within these European Eastern Partnership countries. Also, in terms of DCFTA, it is important for Ukrainian businesses to understand that the second wave of pandemics is already here. And from that, we can say that first steps that we've been forced to make after the first wave are probably not to be returned, and this will simply develop further. So it will definitely affect business development models, and this should be accounted for. And it would be a shame not to use every possibility in this regard that cooperation with the EU offers, because it really offers new opportunities for the worldwide consumer markets, for what we again call the industrial visa-free regime. And as Denis already mentioned, we need not to forget about the climate-related challenges and the tool set of the climate agreement, the green agreement that they have in the EU, and we should join again to avoid technical barriers, either for goods carriers or for other businesses. The document the time frame of the document is until 2050, quite an ambitious time. But nevertheless, we should not wait until 2050. We need to work as fast as we can to better respond to the challenges present and future. Thank you, Andrei. And the next block of our event will be about the responses from private businesses. And we have just professionals here today with us, professionals dealing with European integration, trade integration, economic development of Ukraine. So I'd like to invite today Marina Zemtseva, a representative of the Department for EU Integration from the Parliamentary Committee of Integration with the EU. Thank you. I'm ready to stick to my time. So traditionally, I will speak not more than 5 minutes, and I invite other speakers to follow my suit. I will go step by step. I drafted a range of topics for discussion. I will start by thanking all the partners for organizing this nice online conference. Yes, the Parliament is officially on vacations, but we continue working on legislative pieces. We are busily preparing for the resumption of our Euro integration related lawmaking starting from September. The Parliament and the committee has adopted a range of rather important pieces of legislation. I was myself one of co-authors, one of those bills that were prepared, ready in it to be voted for by the best majority of the Ukrainian Parliament. So I'm involved in this range of topics, and I do know of benefits and risks involved in the ACA-related matters. I think the parliamentarians were up to their task because we finally were able to adopt this law, this bill, sorry, that has been lingering in the parliament for quite long. It was done with support from the presidential office, from the EBA, from a number of business associations. And I'd like to convey the common perception of my committee, the committee members. It's quite a challenging job in which we are supported by the Department for Legislative Assessment. So so our idea is that ACAs are in the hands of the ministry, in the hands of the Cabinet Minister's Office for European Integration. And I do hope that the head of this office, Olga, has enough expertise to do this job. Also, in terms of getting adequate analytical data about our infrastructure, its condition and needs. And I'd like also to mention the 6 local meteorological centers. Mr. Kryzhanovsky, as a representative of Ministry for Economy, will have more on that. I know there are some efforts to disunite the centers, to combine them back. And I think this is exactly the situation when they say, let professionals do what they think is necessary without interfering from outside. I think we as MPs will only contribute to professionals doing their job. And definitely COVID fighting measures are the priority for us these days, and I cannot but mention Ministry of Public Health Protection regulation that they drafted to better fight this pandemic. And actually, the European Committee of the Parliament, the government, think that digital dimensions of this fight are definitely important, and definitely digitalization should be a priority because we have to be one click away of really efficient solutions without going for more paperwork, whether it is about businesses, about registration of businesses. We work with many parliamentary committees on there, and we enjoy their support on that. There is a meeting slated for 17th of September. It will be dedicated to Green Deal matters. We had the reports from the line ministry that everything is ready to sign this Green Deal. We do hope it will be offline meeting. We invite everyone to take part in that. We have to move along the digitalization way. Definitely, we will not be over with pandemics by the time, so we will look further into digital economy development measures, and we will have more events, roundtable discussions to spur this development. We see that SMEs and micro businesses are more than ready to learn digitalization, and we are going to help them. So to finalize my part, I'd like to again repeat that we need to share information, to promote information. We need to spread information about public, about our rank and file citizens, about what are the benefits of EU integration, of economic integration. There are still ideas of opening EU integration offices in Kherson, in Kharkiv. We do remember about that, and I think we will be able to inaugurate them in September, hopefully. Uh, I will gladly cooperate with you further on, with all the stakeholders. Thank you again for your efforts of providing analytics and with offers of success in your meeting. Thank you, Maria. It's really of importance to have an open dialogue with the private sector representatives. We will definitely convey our proposals in documentary form, not just in our presentation, to all relevant stakeholders. So all the line institutions will be notified, and I think these will be implemented in practice. We expected Olga Stefanishina, Vice Prime Minister for your integration, today with us, but unfortunately, she had a snap meeting and she apologized because of not being able to attend. Please welcome Maria Nelina, head of the expert group, to assess the compliance of Ukrainian legislation with EU legislation requirements, the Cabinet Office for European Integration. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you for the information you presented.
По-перше, хотілося б дати відповідь або прокоментувати те, що було зазначено.
I'd start by referring my comments of previous speakers on the role of the ministries, the parliament, in terms of harmonization of Ukrainian legislation and ACA agreements. I think it is not a secret for you that regardless of the type of government we might have today or had previously, key ministries, key professionals, knowing about what association agreement is, have been diligently working on ways of harmonizing the Ukrainian laws with ACA-related EU requirements. If my memory serves me right, it was already in early 2016 when the Ukrainian side had the first industrial dialogue with EU representatives to present what the Ukrainian side has prepared. We spoke of technical regulations adopted in the 3 priority section. We spoke about framework legislation. And at that time, the Ukrainian party sent to the European party the information that Europe requested, including the comparative table for technical regulations. There were no negative comments. We had 1 year to wait for the response, and there were no negative response. And so we were of opinion that everything checked okay. There were a couple of remarks that effectively put on hold the whole process, and we expected for these remarks to be sorted out. So in the spring of 2016, we waited for an EU mission to come out to clear with Ukrainian part couple of these spot comments. But well, it went for a bit longer. It went for good 4 years. This includes measures to assess the infrastructural readiness. A lot of work has been done. European laws evolved in the process, and in spite of political and other competition going on in Ukraine, we try to keep up with the requirements, with these updates. And now we can say proudly, actually, that at this time the football is on the part of the field of the EU side now. So we can wait for the answers of the EU because we've done what we had to do, and I think the European partners have had the chance to see our commitment, our readiness, and Tatiana Mezent have already mentioned how serious we are in terms of overcoming every political barrier in order to institute necessary legislation to make this system of assessment in line with requirements. And again, this is just about 3 sectors, but we are ready to do more. I will not list the rest of measures because I think all of you know it. And the EU side did agree that the expert mission in the scope of TAIEX to evaluate the level of preparedness of the quality assurance structure for further negotiations will take place tentatively in October 2020. That was the last information. But again, from my past experience, there can be multiple of that kind. We had a notification of similar meeting to take place last March, but again, it was COVID situation. So hopefully in October, we are going to have this evaluation mission to assess the level of preparedness of Ukrainian quality assurance structure in terms of being ready for the signing of this agreement. I'd like to commend GSN experts for the quality of their work. But again, if you have a geopolitical look of it, what ACA agreements are for the EU, and as we already have this understanding, what what are they for the EU in world context, we will better be able to understand what are the problems with ACA introduction in Ukraine. The only ACA agreement signed by the EU with international partner has been signed with Israel. There is a number of mutual recognition agreements, but they're different in that the other party is not to harmonize its legislation with the one of the EU. Israel, they did it in a fully fledged way. But there is just a handful of countries, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Switzerland. They have just fully fledged mutual recognition agreement. Then we have Japan with some limitations to that agreement. We have full ACA side with Israel. Again, this is a more thorough version of mutual recognition agreement with applicable harmonization measures. And they have a transitional phase of signing an MRA with the United States. This says that technical barriers to trade implemented by the EU are measures to protect the internal market, first of all. By the number of consumers, the EU and by the size of its market, by the way, the common market,
самообслуговуюча система, тобто система,
is
яка
actually a self-supporting
самообслуговується
entity
самостійно.
that
Вона
can
виробляє
exist
усі
by
потреби,
itself.
вона виробляє, вона
They
може їх
produce
виробити без
everything
потреби
they need,
імпортувати, а лише
and they
надати
can go without
безпосередньо та
imports. They can
експортувати.
provide for
Звісно,
themselves
для того, щоб
without
якимось чином
not just
забезпечувати
importing but even
щодо
exporting.
відбуваються, ну це
And
власне
surely there are
економічні
measures
закони,
to
практика,
protect the
відбуваються
internal
такі заходи,
manufacturers,
технічні бар'єри.
like
Європейський Союз
technical
дуже не
barriers to
хоче і
trade.
йде на
And the
зниження
EU
цих
is really
бар'єрів, це
reluctant
можна
to
зрозуміти.
soften these
Україна
barriers, which is
історично,
understandable.
останнім часом, знаєте,
Meanwhile,
таке пропагандує бачення
historically,
України як
Ukraine
аграрної держави. Однак історично Україна це промислова держава.
uh,
Україна славиться
it has been an industrial
технічними
country despite being called
інженерними
agrarian one.
які покидають нашу країну в пошуках кращого життя і
The
кращого
problem is that
Тому ми
multiple times we've
говоримо
seen
про
brain
те,
drains when people
яким
with
чином
bright minds would leave the
продовжувати
country for
інвестувати,
better
яким
future, for
чином
better salaries, etc.
відновити, яким чином
And the
забезпечити
question for
місце.
the government, I think, is
Угода
how
про
to restore
асоціацію
this
збираємо ви
industrial
не
basis
останню,
of
ми
the
говоримо
country. And I
першочергово про
think
те,
the association
без
agreement plays one of the
на
pivotal
знімання
roles
з
in this
перегляду угоди про
matter.
асоціацію.
I think the
Дійсно,
time
угоду
is
про асоціацію
right to
заключаємо
review
21
this
року, має
association
завершитися
agreement. And at the
угоди
beginning of the
досягненням
next year,
цілей.
there
Однією з
will be
таких
a
цілей
comprehensive
угоди,
review
для
of
України особливо важливо для
what has
бізнесу,
been
для
achieved throughout
промисловості і
the
підписання
association
АКА.
agreement
Угода діє з
implementation.
2015 року, вже до
And
2016
ACA
року
has
було
been
прийнято
among these
законодавство,
targets.
тобто Україна йшла наперед, виконувала
The
свої громадські
association
зобов'язання.
agreement
До
was
сьогодні
put in
ці
place in
досягнуто навіть
2016, and sometimes Ukraine even went further than its commitments.
Я думаю, що варто обов'язково у співпраці з бізнесом, обов'язково у
And I
співпраці
think
з
really the
організаціями,
time is
організаціями,
ripe
експертами
to
вашої
consult
країни,
businesses and to
подумати про те,
consult
яким
best of the
чином
best
нам
experts from your
рухатися
community to
для
think
зняття торговельних бар'єрів на
how should we move
промисловому,
to
що
really
стосується
eliminate
експорту.
these technical
Якщо
barriers
АКА для нас
to industrial, to
виглядає як
agricultural
країна або
products.
надто неприйнятний варіант для європейських
If it is a
промисловців
price too high for
і
Ukraine, if it is
європейських
something that is
бюрократів, то
not
треба
acceptable for
думати
Euro bureaucrats or for European
інший
format should emerge.
щодо
Not
поліпшення
ACA, but
угоди,
maybe
яка
mutual
не
recognition agreement
вимагатиме
would serve the
не
purpose,
вимагатиме таких
which would not
жорстких
require such stringent
санкцій,
measures like
які були
ACA
більш
would have,
прийнятними для
and
європейського
which would
бізнесу, а
nevertheless be
вони
acceptable
більш
for you businesses. Or maybe there would be
дозволять
other
використовувати
frameworks
ПВЗВТ наповну. Бо якщо
in
говорити
place
чесно,
which will
ПВЗВТ працює зараз
allow
лише по тарифній
DCFTA
хармонізації.
to
Ми не
work
бачимо тарифної
in the full mode.
хармонізації.
At the
Дуже
moment, it
повільно йде по
predominantly
СПЗ,
works in terms of
а
tariff
по промисловості
liberalization, but this is again just a partial
тому
solution.
уряд для себе ставить це. Ми в урядовому офісі, я не буду говорити за уряд,
So
мені члени
I don't know about the government. I do not represent the government, but as as a representative of the Office for European Integration with the cabinet, I can assure you that this is our priority objective in terms of economic development, business development. We know that the Ukrainian export makes for just 1%. Sorry, import makes only 1% of the
Європейський Союз складає в
European
стосунку українського
import.
експорту 42%. Тобто
Okay.
Європейський Союз зовсім не
Okay.
залежить від України, в той час, як ми наполовину
And
залежимо від кон'юнктури і торгівельних умов з Європейським Союзом.
42% of European exports
Для
accounting for
всієї спільноти, для бізнесу,
Ukrainian
для
imports.
експертів,
So
думати,
European
що зробити.
countries are practically independent from us in terms of the imports, but we are dependent on the EU in terms of our imports. And I think the question is how and where to find acceptable formats which will be suitable for both parties, for the EU, for Ukraine. And I think all the stakeholders need to join their efforts to work together. And I think that this is also the responsibility of the EU as much as Ukraine has its own responsibilities before the EU. Sorry, just to mention that you have just 1 minute before your time is over. In terms of our input in the Green Deal. We have our concept that we developed on that, and we look into how it will affect SMEs, because environmental standards are quite costly for implementation, and we need thorough communication with businesses for that, to see how they're ready, whether they're ready to commit to this extent. And we need to really protect our interest with full understanding of the specifics of our industrial development and the impact on climate. Thank you, Marina. I think we have representatives from the Ministry of Economy you mentioned. I'd like to invite Tatiana Melnichenko, Deputy Head of the Department for Standardization International Collaboration, Head of International Collaboration and Quality Department, Ministry for Economy and Agriculture. Thank you for this invitation to participate in this important discussion. The survey you with Denise carried out and with other experts is really of great importance for technical regulation, for in terms of shaping relevant policies. The survey is important for two reasons. First of all, you lay bare a very important point of necessary communication between all the participants of quality assurance infrastructure. And Marina was right that we had lengthy negotiations on ACA implementation, and we never made it to practical steps. And now we have this understanding that it takes everyone to go jointly together in proper coordination. I mean, government, business circles, quality assurance bodies, etc., technical regulation authorities. And we need to go together with proper view and understanding of market surveillance measures, and this is the only way for us to achieve desired results. For the past 7 months, we've been in constant negotiation with the EU delegation to Ukraine, and I'm personally thankful to Mr. Bauer, Ms. Simona Raundina, other European colleagues for being in communication with us on that. And there are already some results, some progress to be reported in terms of ACA, signing the ACA agreement. We are speaking of ACAs for 3 sectors that you all know. And the Ukrainian party did comply with all the commitments it had taken on itself, like horizontal legislation, horizontal harmonization of legislation. We had also reviewed our vertical legislation, technical regulations on the safety of machinery, and so we ensured that they are in compliance with European directives and regulations, and we have confirmations from our European colleagues. We had them for 3 years already. We are thankful to Ms. Mezhentseva and other Parliament representatives for their involvement in this market surveillance-related matters, for applicable parliamentary resolution to support these measures. It was actually some of the key steps to prove that the roadmap towards ACA agreements has been gone through by Ukraine, and that we are ready for evaluation mission visit. We've got a signal from the European Union, information from Taras Kachka, the trade representative of Ukraine on that. We are waiting for this preliminary evaluation mission from EU. It will be about the analysis of our horizontal legislation, and hopefully in October, we will see 7 more expert missions from the EU to look into all key priority sectors. to evaluate activities of line ministries engaged in technical regulation, to evaluate the market surveillance measures, the compliance authority infrastructure, the National Standardization Authority, and the National Accreditation Authority. So I think that, yes, we've done everything we need to do, and it's time. We're waiting for the move from the EU side. In 15 years of our work over the car topic, the last 7 or maybe 8 months have been the most promising and most rich in results. So fingers crossed. I'd like to thank Anastasia, Denise, other representatives and authors of the survey for your job. Yes, communication with businesses is of great importance. It was one of our key priorities throughout these 7 months. Together with GZ, we did a communication platform on technical regulation aspects, and we were able to communicate online in real time, answering concerns and inquiries from the public, from businesses, from SMEs, on every piece of information related to trade relations with EU and EU markets. And we saw an avalanche of questions from businesses that clearly showed initially people knew little, if anything, about whether national standards or European standards or the level of harmonization. Now we see that the level of knowledge is improved, and I can tell you that our standards are really pretty much coordinated and harmonized with applicable EU regulations. So question remains how to facilitate this transfer to EU standards and norms for Ukrainian businesses. It can be done with our help. You can use our platform, Tech Reg in UA. You can find wealth of information, webinars, seminars, exactly related to a car topic. Last March, with support for Elena Bazar, Denis Bazilevich, Benjamin Klinger, and GZ, we had a huge bout of professional communication involving businesses, representatives of quality assurance infrastructure, with some TBT professionals, top professionals from the EU present. And these guys had really deep knowledge on ACA-related matters, named Anna Bersio and others. They know lots of practical things about ACAs, how it should be concluded, what are the specifics, etc. And we heard recommendations on that. We had people like Serbian expert with their own unique experience of ACA-related matters. And just a couple of words on how to eliminate TBT is mentioned by Anastasia and Denis. Yes, we have a number of options. It is possible to open access for Ukraine to European markets, and we can open this market for EU products and services. But again, the priority here, the key matter, is to see and check that local consumers here on there receive top quality products or services. And Dennis did mention specific agreements signed between individual companies or with certain bodies. Should be very careful about that, because it's not about just your any body, your any authority or any company signing that agreement, because you risk ending with not mandatory agreement, but something that will not serve its purpose. Meanwhile, we have Article 45 of the law of Ukraine on technical compliance and technical regulations that speaks about national accreditation authorities. authorized to do applicable accreditation steps. And it says further that these bodies should be members of relevant international bodies or national bodies to ensure recognition of their qualifications. And Marina did mention the most practical step. Marina mentioned this MRA. In terms of ACA, we already have some progress with 3 sectors of the 27 mentioned in the annex to the agreement. And Taras Kachka says there are certain pre-agreements to broaden the number of sectors involved, like medical related regulations, regulations related to agricultural machinery and equipment, and other sectors. So we are in the process of negotiations on that. And I'd like to thank everyone for your engagement, for your communications. Our platform is ready to facilitate this communication. Thank you, Tatiana, for your words, for your work. Dear participants, please don't be shy. Switch on your video screens to see your faces, to see your involvement and your willingness to communicate. If someone is willing to join this open discussion, please write in chat. We have short time slots for private sector representatives, particularly 2-3 minutes to speak up on the topic. Another floor is given to Oksana Dekun, head of the unit of External Policy, Office of the President of Ukraine. Don't forget to switch on your mic. We can't quite hear you. Hi, everyone. I thank the event organizers for having me here. The topic is really of great relevance on the backdrop of the events from the past several months. The question to use the association agreement to its max is a political matter for us, because in the final count, if you're able to efficiently use this very efficient tool, the whole our prospect of further move towards European integration will depend. I think everyone present here remembers that the objectives of the association agreement are about your economic integration and measures to support the internal market in areas mentioned in the agreement. I think everyone also knows that Ukraine has been actively promoting sectoral integration with the EU in some priority areas like energy sector, digital economy, customs, investments, internal affairs. And this initiative, together with the initiated review of annexes to the association agreement, it is our contribution to further efficient use of this agreement. The crisis events that not just Ukraine, but all other countries have to go through because of pandemics and its effects also affect the process. I'd like to briefly outline those matters voiced up by business representatives and representatives of government institutions in the light of preparation for the next EU-Ukraine summit slated for 1st of October, unless something changes. So the ACA topic, the one of digital economy, the one of elimination of infrastructural barriers mentioned by Ms. Melnichenko. These are all the matters included in the agenda of the summit, and we will do our best to see that the next summit is a step ahead in implementation of our priorities, particularly in the area of enhanced and deeper sectoral integration with the EU. Ukraine will present at this summit its updated position on continuation of the association agreement. We'll speak about the progress with ACAI agreement that we've been speaking about today. Before the summit, we are going to have a preliminary evaluation mission with experts from the European Commission. We expect certain progress in granting the internal market treatment to the telecommunications market. We would like to see progress with Chapter 17, updated Annex 17. We also want to see some improvements in the area of natural gas market operation requirements within the meaning of this Annex 17 and updates to it. We hope to move further with deblocking the with agreement of joint airspace use. I think you know the complexities around this matter have been lingering, and definitely solving the matter will require consensus at the level of EU member states, particularly one of the states. We do hope that the solution will be discovered in the coming months and the agreement will be signed. I think Ms. Melnichenko mentioned that the pandemics really exacerbated the problem that our cargo carriers face, and I think we are going to mention that during the summit, and this is in the agenda of our negotiations with many EU member states. And I think the objective today for us is to involve the European Commission to find a more comprehensive solution to the problem. But generally, the discussion is really timely, and definitely it will bring results that we will take into account when preparing for the summit. Thank you for this event and for your survey that you carried out, for your work. Thank you, Oksana. I hope that the recommendations from the private sector expressed today will also help you to prepare for the summit you mentioned. We will send you the results, the record of this event with presentation. It is already in Ukrainian. We also prepared the English version of it. And please welcome Tatiana Miskova, Acting Director of the State Authority for Export Promotion of Ukraine. Good afternoon. Thank you for invitation. So we are at the crossroads. I mean, my institution is at the crossroads of the state, governmental, and private sectors, because though being governmental institution, we do contribute to, we do help businesses to improve their export capacities and potential. We help them build their strategies of entering markets, and we definitely want companies prosper in that with their export supplies. Our services are free of charge. We are subsidized by the government to offer these free of charge services for private businesses, and 75% of our customers are SMEs because they need it the most. We offer consulting services. We verify their readiness before they enter the market. We help them search for partners. We do analytical surveys, all the trade missions, trade shows and fairs. These are the areas in which our office helps Ukrainian companies. I'd like to thank you for your survey, because in our activities we often have to face these problems with business operations, particularly abroad. We see that our experts grow in spite of all the barriers, of the problems with it. The COVID-19 pandemics definitely kickstarted some really interesting trends, particularly with better penetration of IT technologies in all aspects of economic activities. And I think we can look quite positively on these new trends. These trends help separating individual niches in which Ukrainian companies can occupy their due place. I would not repeat what has already been said here. I'm really thankful for previous speakers for mentioning it. I can tell you that the governmental efforts to support businesses, this is a really very important piece of work. It is not always visible, publicly visible, but I do know that the government, MPs, and Mr. Praskachka, they do understand the need to prioritize these matters. They need to better harmonize Ukrainian legislation and regulations with European directives and regulations. And thank you, Tatiana, for explaining what your platform has been doing, where they can get the information from. However, this is not only a question of information, it's about a matter of trust of local manufacturers, local service providers to Ukrainian standards and regulations. In our practice, we've seen situations when a certificate for ISO 9001 was not accepted by international partners. So the company requested an international certificate of compliance with ISO 9001, saying that Ukrainian one was not valid. I think it's about building trust. It will really help companies better promote their product, better penetrate markets. It is also a matter of building a systemic support of experts infrastructure in Ukraine. It is really hard for Ukrainian companies to compete internationally with some bigger companies with a history of world domination, whether from Germany or from other countries. So such cooperation with partners, with technical assistance projects like the ones implemented by GZ is really important. That way we are able to learn from cases, from their historical experience, to better understand how our companies could build the international networks, how they could retain their buyers, how they can improve the competitiveness of their produce. Really, international competitiveness of products is probably the most painful and priority topic. Sometimes companies are not quite successful in selling their products here in Ukraine. Imagine how they would look like going international. Still more that the pandemic has shifted the world economy, and definitely companies need to look for ways to improve their competences and skills. In our office, we work with IT sector, with agri-food producers and agricultural and food processing machinery and equipment. In Ukraine, the agricultural and food processing sectors are one of the drivers for machine building and IT sector development. We also work with wood processing manufacturers, and we work with the Industry 4.0, everything related to IT, automation. It's a strong sector that needs to be looked into. Unfortunately, the trade missions, trade shows, in offline mode, sorry, they have been postponed or cancelled, and only online platforms still operate. The European Enterprise Europe Network is one of the most active in the EU. It unites companies from 66 countries. They have lots of matchmaking events, trade mission shows online. And 30 to 40 companies working in the area of IT and automation, they already actively participate in these measures. And in 18th, 20th of November, we are going to have an online IT matchmaking event, by the way. So I suggest everyone working in this area registers with our office to participate in the event, to enhance and increase their networks of contacts with potential leads inside. The industry goes ahead and it develops, and I think we will only see more online models of operation further on. Increasingly, companies are creating the online 3D shows for trade fairs to show everything they produce. I'd like to use this possibility to and join to the calls upon joining it, because it should be a really coordinated attempt to go to new markets using these new formats and new models. It is also time to enhance your competencies and skills to improve your chances. Thank you, Tatiana. Very useful advice, I would say. We'd be grateful if you sent all participants the link to register for that event, and we will gladly share this information. And now we can switch to an open discussion. We have a request from the Federation of Fisheries of Ukraine. You can write those willing to participate in discussion, you can write your question and the name of your organization in the chat. Maybe you have some comments or proposals. In the meantime, I'd like to invite Mr. David Lee from Georgia. He is the director of EBA chapter in Georgia, and they're implementing exactly this DCFTA related agreement there. And when joining, Mr. Lee, just don't forget to check the English channel in interpretation function.
Okay, thank you very much, Anastasia. Can you hear me?
Так,
Great.
чуємо.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's been a very useful conference. One of the problems in Georgia, which I think is probably one of the problems that you have in Ukraine, is getting enough publicity around this event. Potentially the DCFTA is clearly enormous, and the Ukraine is actually doing much better at increasing its exports than Georgia. I think that's partly, as one of the previous speakers has said, Ukraine is well known as an agrarian economy, but it's actually also a heavily industrialized economy. So that is something that Georgia presently lacks. But what I think has been very useful about today's conference and the work that we're doing in Ukraine and also the work that's being done in Moldova is that we're all facing the same problems. And I'm very proud that the European business associations in each country have been able to get together with GIZ and the European Union to put this conference on. It's quite clear that each country, in fact, not maybe all of the Eastern Partnership, but certainly Moldova, Ukraine and Georgia have massive potential to increase the standards within the country, to increase the awareness and to start the exports. And I think success for any one of the countries is a success for all three, because it provides a great example to the other countries. European Business Association is by far the largest, but we've certainly followed you closely. We received a lot of assistance from the European Business Association in Moldova when we set up 3 years ago. And personally, I'm very pleased with the progress that all three countries are making. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I think you did a fantastic job, Anastasia, well done. I do not speak Ukrainian, но я могу говорить по-русски. Я думал, что это было приятно. Диди, спасибо большое.
Дякуємо вам, Девіде. Для нас дуже приємно, що ви робите нашу
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure for us to have you because you contribute to making it the discussion an international one. It's a pleasure cooperating with you and knowing about your Georgian experience. I'd like to invite now Natalia Bilyakova, representative of Khmelnytsk Chamber of Trade and Commerce. After that, we will hear from the Federation from Fisheries. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, partners, coordinators. Big thanks to all of you from the Khmelnytsk Chamber of Trade and Commerce for the good work you've done and you are doing, and for this pleasure of joining your activity. We've been actively cooperating with Denise during the European Industrial Week, throughout the introduction of TechRec platform in Ukraine. We have been actively involved in doing survey among businesses in the time of pandemics and other events. We are always in contact online with representatives of EU chambers of commerce in all the countries. We see that ministries, Ministry of Economy, other are active participants of this dialogue to enhance possibilities of Ukrainian experts. We see that Taras Kachka, representatives of our diplomatic missions, are regular participants in such work. We see the Council of Exporters communicating on a regular basis. And all the results of the surveys and proposals voiced by the speakers here, I can simply agree. I cannot agree more, actually, because everything is of high relevance. Speaking about businesses and their feedbacks, so technical regulation is a matter that becomes only more relevant in this pandemic time. And definitely it posts additional requirements to all sorts of resources available to every company. And we need support. And ACA agreement, if signed, it will be a huge support for our industrial sector. The Chamber of Trade of Commerce of Ukraine is now preparing consultants in technical regulation. And actually last month we had a 5-day online marathon in which businesses participated in search for answers how to remain relevant and rebound in this time, how to get involved in this industrial visa-free regime, how to introduce technical regulations and quality requirements in production. So I think those questions of information awareness raising and consolidation of efforts that have been mentioned several times today, that definitely those matters that the chambers of commerce and trade in Ukraine can subscribe for. to enhance the level of technical material support, to improve possibilities for business to become more compliant with safety security requirements at the European level, to make it a working agreement. So without stealing more of your time, I can tell you, I hope that we will probably see many more successful projects, separate things, GSZ for the active support. We are glad to be able to participate in your processes with an Eastern Partnership with Germany projects. Thank you for your efforts to make Ukrainian produce more competitive, for helping our SMEs, our cargo transporters, in their efforts to boost their trade and can increase their knowledge together with European partners. Thank you. The thanks is ours, Natalia. We will do our best to assist this as well. And one of probably most active participants for our discussion, Mr. Viktor Lisitsky, who represents the Federation of Fisheries of Ukraine. Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to be concise. The maritime fishing industry of Ukraine has been an important competitive advantage for Ukraine for good 250 years, even during the time of Russian Empire. So whether it was because of the god or for whatever reason, but we've been blessed with sitting nearby the Black Sea. And this is an important part of our, it's important economically. Sadly, for a number of past years, we see sad developments here. It is not just about fisheries, it's about maritime transport. So the international maritime authorities say that a ton of maritime shipment, international shipment, can bring about $10,000 into the budget. Last year, Ukraine handled 160 million tons of cargo. You'd say, where are the money? Unfortunately, the majority of vessels were registered to other countries. For the past year, the government tends to overlook the development of the Ukrainian maritime fleet. If at the beginning of independence we had the total dead weight of our fleet at the range of 6,200,000 tons, now we have 10 times less. For the majority, the Ukrainian vessels go under the flags of other countries. 3,300,000 tons worth of Ukrainian vessels use other flags of registration, bringing money to these countries, not to Ukraine. So the ship owners from Ukraine get their due, but from these countries, leaving nothing for Ukraine. There was a special treatment mechanism implemented, which contributed to a real quick growth of the export capacities. And it kept like that for 7 years until Yulia Tymoshenko broke the scheme. There are attempts to revive the shipbuilding industry in Ukraine, but there are no systemic measures in sight. It should be really a systemic view of the situation, not piecemeal solutions. We have draft legislation sitting in presidential office for a good year without any reaction. couple of years ago, a similar draft legislation on VAT in maritime sector was moved through the parliament, so it was a small but important move, but nothing after that. That way we are losing our capacity, our possibility in maritime transport and shipbuilding. We are losing in terms of the cargo handling, cargo transportation. I think we are losing several billions of dollars every year in terms of GDP because of that. I've listened carefully to your speeches, and I can tell you that we need to revive our maritime transport and shipbuilding doctrine. It has been adopted several years ago. It's a lengthy document with lots of really thorough and well thought suggestions included. It was written jointly by shipmasters, by harbor authorities, by guys at the maritime ministry, by everyone in the industry was there. We try to draw the attention of the government to the need to revive this sector. So we will try to speak again to the office of the president to buy in for their attention to make things happen. So thank you for listening to me. I use this event as an inspiration for me to work further on that. Thank you. I'd like to give the floor now to our key expert in the project, Denis Basilevich, for final remarks. Thank you, Anastasia. I feel that all of us are key experts here. The discussion, the presentations we've had today, the information we've shared between each other is of paramount importance because it's very important way of cross-communication between all the stakeholders. And I think this COVID situation creates just new opportunities for us to talk about things. And there will be even better opportunity for us to do some progress this autumn during the EU-Ukraine summit, during other events planned, also in relation to DCFTA. It will be about an ongoing, deepening dialogue, as Marina mentioned. Yeah, Ukraine is not Israel. It was easier for them to negotiate their ACA accords. But we have other positives. We have better consolidation of businesses, I hope. And with everyone doing his job, with proper consolidation of efforts, I think we will come victorious. So hopefully, early next year, we will be able to sign the ACA agreement. And definitely it is necessary to have more of such discussions to feel and be on the same page, not just in Ukraine, but also with other countries, with Georgia, with Moldova. The aggregate experience we've accumulated cannot be overestimated. It is also a matter of, building like those regional coalitions. Still more that in diplomatic practice, such regional coalitions are considered, like something like a show of real professionalism. And this leaves entrepreneurs with even stricter task to make their products and services more competitive, more quality, to be worth the game. Particularly when we speak about cluster models, if we speak and when we speak about our value-adding chains. So I'm really thank you for this discussion today. And I hope that the proposals we've charted here today will be of great relevance. I completely agree with you, Denise, about the dialogue. I'd like to thank all the government representatives who participated, because we had representatives of all the line bodies involved in economic development matters, in EU integration. We will send you a link to the video channel from the conference with recording. It will be delivered in 2 languages, in English and Ukrainian, for EU delegation to Ukraine representatives. We will also provide you with a position paper from business sector representatives to the government, to EU institutions. Thank you for being active during this conversation. Thank you for being with us throughout the project. Again, the topic was trade association with the EU as a tool to overcome economic consequences of COVID-19 pandemics, with wishes of good growth possibilities and inspiration in your work. Thank you again. Have a good day.
До побачення.